It is October 1st. Green Day has awoken from their torpor, and it is October's first Fairfolk Friday. Many of you may be familiar with the creating of jack-o'-lanterns with pumpkins, turnips, or even squashes. But do you know what kind of spirits in Irish folklore are supposed to be repelled by such things? They are called the Slogs, the Host, a grouping of malicious creatures that often come out at night, specifically on the dates of Samhain. Christians have defined them as the spirits of sinners that will go after anyone who happens to be out at night, but the older lore is a little more complex. And the lore is not the same everywhere, but in my family, these are spirits of people that have no living descendants to hold the silent supper with. And so all they have to do is wander. Samhain draws ever closer again, and it's Fairfolk Friday. And today, we're going to talk about one of the most feared Sidhe, the Dullahan. Also known as the Headless Horseman, its visage is all that implies. It can either be in the shape of a human man or woman, and generally has a horse. Though sometimes it is also accompanied by a wagon. In many legends, the Dullahan is essentially an avatar for Crom Cruach, a figure in Irish mythology that is known for having specifically blood sacrifices. And rumored that its purpose is to make sure those sacrifices keep happening since now we no longer do them. If seen by a mortal, they will attack said mortal with a whip made out of a human spine and blind that eye as a warning. You may be able to repel them with gold, but not forever. Good evening, Witch Tuck, and everyone else awaiting Fairfolk Friday. Today, we're going to talk about the Cat Sidhe. The majority of folklore of Cat Sidhe can be found in the Scottish Highlands. However, there are certain British and Irish folklore, and on Samhain, the Cat Sidhe can indeed be anywhere. Many people may be familiar with them as just large black cats, but these are not just large black cats. The Cat Sidhe are the size of dogs, and they're not all black. They have a single white spot on their chest. They are said to bless the houses of anyone who leaves milk out for them on Samhain. Those who don't, the udders of your cows will dry up. And if you have no livestock, well, imagine a dog-sized cat running amok in your house. They're a playful bunch of soul stealers. So in my last video I mentioned the Cat Sidhe are soul stealers, so please, link back to this comment for that video. But I did want to elaborate on that, because they're not gonna actively be stealing your soul unless you've already, started that journey, so to speak. This idea does mostly come from Christian myth, and it will only happen during the time period between the wake and the body being actually buried. Basically, the legend is that if a cat jumps over a corpse, that it in some fashion will steal the soul, the spiritual energy, whatever you want to call it, of said deceased person. And it was actually a job to protect this corpse from such things happening to them. There would be no fire around the corpse because they would believe that the Cat Sidhe would be drawn to the warmth of it, and these people would, they would play with the cats. They would have cat toys and everything, just to make sure that the cat did not jump over the corpse. I hope this video was informative. It's another Fairfolk Friday, and Samhain draws ever closer. It is a belief on Samhain that the Sidhe mounds will open up, and it is possible to see the dining and other celebrations that the Sidhe themselves will be doing for Samhain. But there is one type of Sidhe that is not invited even to other Sidhe's dinner. And that creature is the Puka. Mischievous shapeshifters, the Puka can take the form of a horse, a hare, a cat or a dog, and oftentimes a goat. They also have a humanoid form, but generally this form, as seen in the statue earlier, will still have animalistic qualities, often still having a tail, having the ears of an animal, or just flat out the head. Even among the Sidhe, they are known for twisting their words and at times being said to be incapable of telling the whole truth. They, however, can be either beneficial or malicious. It is the last Friday, before many people will be celebrating Samhain. And for tonight, I have a very interesting Fair Folk Friday. It is the fair folk that I am the most afraid of. Coming from my family's lore, we call them the Skull-Shi, or the Shadow-Shi, but I have heard very similar creatures called a fetch in this case. If you have an Irish grandmother that told you not to spend too much time looking at yourself in the mirror, they may have been warning you about the Skull-Shi. They exist in your shadows and can manifest in your reflections, particularly in mirrors, lakes, but any reflection has a possibility of it. They feed off your dreams, and if they ever finish your last dream, they take over your body and switch places with you. And you watch the Skull-Shi live your life. Today is another Fair Folk Friday, and I mentioned this earlier, so I figured I should do a video on them. And today, we're going to talk more about the Shellycoats. Named as such because they wear coats of seaweed and seashells, to varying degrees depended by the region. Shellycoats normally inhabit Scotland and northern England, though some coastal regions of Ireland also have them. While in some cases referred to as boogeymen, this is something of a misnomer and possibly a confusion with other fair folk, because they're not really malicious in any way. While they will do tricks, sometimes they are known for pretending to drown, or otherwise misdirecting humans, no lasting damage or actual attacks. Certain regions in Scotland also refer to them as house sprites, meaning that Shellycoats can serve in a similar capacity as brownies or boobatches. If you've ever heard a rattling sound by the water, it is likely the sound of their coat.
Solitary Poggin is celebrating the holidays early with family, so today's Fair Folk Friday will be presented by Rocket H. Raccoon. Jimmy Squarefoot is a member of the Farishan, or Manx Fair Folk, taking the form of either a large pig, or a bipedal pig with square shoes made from calico. Believed to be either the pet or steed of a four Manx stone-throwing giants who left him behind. He can run on water just as well as he can on land. Despite his appearance and habit of excitingly running at humans, he is not inherently dangerous and is peaceful, and no records of attacks are reported. Why primary scene in Grenaby district on the Isle of Man? A figure known as Jemmy Squarefoot, who has a similar appearance, is a known figure throughout northern European waters.
It's been a while since I've done a Fair Folk Friday, and I kind of want to get back into doing that. And this is technically not a fair folk creature, but is a very interesting supernatural creature that you can find in a lot of places, though I believe it's especially popular in the Appalachians. And there's a couple different names for them, but the one that I hear most often is the Rattlebones, which, as the name implies, is effectively walking skeletons that rattle as they move. And the reason they exist is that, for whatever reason, they have been buried improperly, usually in a shallow grave. Sometimes they are the result of innocent victims of wrong place, wrong time, and others they participated in criminal activity and it caught up to them. So if you hear a suspicious rattling noise, especially over certain highways, don't stop. Keep walking. The only known way to stop them is to bury them properly. So it's time for another Fair Folk Friday. Did you know if someone calls you mind-boggling, they are technically accusing you of fairy magic? Some of you who work with horses may understand the term when a horse boggles, which is when a horse is suddenly surprised by something. And this something may or may not be visible, and this is partially because in a lot of old myths, horses can see the Shi and other fair folk. And the term boggle in of itself means to cause hesitation in a state of fear. A boggle is also a classification of fair folk, specifically in lowland Scotland and North Northumbria. Certain fair folk from these regions, such as the Barguess, the Shellycoats, the Headley Cow, the Northumbrian Ettins, fit under this classification because they seemingly exist just to perplex mankind, to boggle mankind. It is even the etymological origins of the term boggart. Thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed. Fair Folk Friday, and last week we talked about the classification of boggles, so I'm going to spend the next few Fridays talking about specific things under that classification, and today I'm going to talk about the Barghest. The Barghest serve as both death omens, and at least in Northumbria, is the name attributed to their house elves. They generally take the forms of animals, most commonly a black dog, though bears are also an option, rabbits, but they have also been known to take the form of a headless man, to the shock of many. When serving their purpose as a death omen, they will generally lay on the threshold of a household to say that someone in the household is dying, and if you try to cross the threshold while they are there, you are likely to be attacked and gain a scar that will never heal. They can also turn invisible, and they can only be found by hearing the sounds of rattling chains, and these chains often cause dogs to bark, a very large amount of dogs, and this amount of barking is a sign of death in of itself. If one is after you, they cannot cross rivers. So lately we've been talking about both the Boggle classification and the Norse and Celtic integration that happened in the Celtic Isles over there. So today's Fair Folk Friday is a decent combination of both those topics. In Northumbria, there is a creature called an Etten, but it is also called things like the Jotun, Yetin, and other things, so it seems to surmise that there is likely a common origin between these creatures and the Norse Jotun, which sometimes was just used as a word for any magical creature. Now, mostly the Ettins, or Jotun, are found around the Devil's Causeway, which is a Roman road in Northumbria. Generally described as shape-shifting giants, and the exact level of giant ranges from, just 7 foot tall to, giant. Said to be the cause of both minor injuries and stolen things on the causeway. It's another Fair Folk Friday, and today we're going to go into Welsh Fair Folk for a little bit. Specifically, we're going to talk about the Wagon Annwn. Forgive my pronunciation, I even looked it up, but Welsh is hard. The Wagon Annwn are lake maidens, and they are so old, they actually do not really seem to have an origin. They live in palaces under the lakes of Wales, generally only coming to land to dance, hunt, or perhaps just explore, and they usually do this in pairs, though there are some recordings of 3 at a time. While predominantly female, there are males to this race. They are generally 6 foot tall, and you can differentiate them from just tall people by their inability to count beyond 5. Keep in mind that's likely in the Welsh language. They are incredibly fragile, being able to bruise at even the slightest touch. While this makes marriage difficult, this is the origin story of many Welsh witch families. So last night, I was staying in the Airbnb, and I believe that me and my friends experienced a very interesting folktale native to Tennessee. We heard short bursts of a woman screaming, and no other animals could be heard. No bugs, no dogs, deathly silent other than the scream. This figure is known as the White Screamer. According to local sources, the White Screamer has been heard since the 1920s and has always been an omen of disaster, most of the time death, including one story that involved the death of a mother and the 7 children being discovered by the father who went to investigate these screams. Tennessee's own Banshee